The night was quiet, and the small town was settling into its usual rhythm. Streetlights cast their yellow glow across the roads, and most houses had already gone dark. Only the faint barking of a dog and the distant hum of passing cars broke the silence. He walked home after finishing a long shift, his hands tucked into his jacket pockets, his eyes half lost in thought. His life had always been simple: work, family, and a handful of friends who knew him as the man who never said no to helping someone in need. He never thought of himself as brave, but he carried a calmness that made others trust him. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of pine trees from the forest nearby. He often walked this route at night, finding peace in the cool wind and the starlit sky. But on this night, something unusual happened. The sky flickered. At first it looked like a shooting star, but then it grew brighter, too bright, burning across the darkness with streaks of green and silver light. He stopped, his heart racing, as the object tore across the sky and disappeared behind the tree line of the forest with a deep rumble. The ground beneath his feet trembled, and he heard the distant crack of trees snapping. His first thought was that it might have been a plane crash. The idea sent chills through him, but he didn't hesitate. He left the road and started toward the forest. His boots sank into soft soil as he pushed past bushes and low-hanging branches. The night that had once felt calm now carried an uneasy weight. Smoke drifted in the air, and the sharp smell of burning metal grew stronger with every step. When he reached the clearing, his breath caught in his chest. There, half buried in the earth, was something that did not look like anything he had ever seen before. The object was large, broken into sections, glowing faintly as if alive. Its surface shimmered with strange patterns that shifted when the light touched them. Sparks leapt from cracks in its structure, and smoke hissed into the night air. It was no airplane, no helicopter, no human machine at all. For a moment he stood frozen, wondering if he should turn back and call for help. But then he heard it, the sound of crying. It was soft at first, muffled under the creaking metal, but it was unmistakable. A child's cry. His hesitation vanished. Without thinking of what might happen to him, he hurried toward the wreck. The ground was hot and the air burned his throat with smoke, but he pushed forward, covering his mouth with his sleeve. The sound grew clearer as he circled the wreck. A section of the strange craft had split open, revealing twisted beams and shattered panels. Through the wreckage he spotted movement. His heart jumped as he realized it was not a human child. The small figure was trapped under heavy fragments, its limbs trembling as it tried to free itself. Its skin glowed faintly in shades of blue and silver, and its large eyes shimmered with tears. Though its form was different from a human child's, the fear in its cries was the same. He didn't stop to think about what it was or where it came from. To him it was a child in danger. He dropped to his knees and began pulling at the broken pieces that pinned it down. The metal was hot, scraping his hands, but he gritted his teeth and kept working. The child's glowing eyes watched him, wide with fear, but slowly, as his voice spoke softly, "It's okay. I'll get you out. Don't be afraid." The trembling lessened. It took all his strength to move one of the heavier beams. His muscles burned and sweat ran down his face despite the cool night. But finally the beam shifted enough for the child to slide free. He reached forward, carefully, lifting the small figure into his arms. It was lighter than he expected, its body warm and delicate, and it clung to him with tiny hands, its cries softening into whimpers. For a moment he just stood there, holding the child against his chest. His heart was pounding, but a strange calm settled over him. He had done what he would have done for any child, human or not. The glow of the wreck flickered behind him, and the forest seemed to fall into an unnatural silence, as if waiting for what would come next. He glanced down at the child, whose eyes were still wet with tears. Its small chest rose and fell quickly, but it no longer seemed to be in immediate pain. He whispered gently again, hoping the tone of his voice could comfort it, even if it didn't understand his words. In that instant, he felt an invisible thread form, a connection that went beyond differences. Then, as he shifted the child in his arms, he noticed movement at the edge of the clearing. Shadows stretched long across the trees, and he felt the presence of others. The child turned its head as if recognizing something, and let out a soft sound that was neither fear nor relief but something in between. He tensed, his eyes scanning the darkness. Whoever or whatever was coming, he knew they had seen him, holding the child. His grip tightened, not out of fear of the child, but out of a strange instinct to protect it. He didn't know what kind of world he had just stepped into, but he knew one thing for certain. He couldn't walk away now. The night that had begun as quiet and ordinary was now the start of something far greater than he could imagine. The man who had once thought of himself as just another face in a small town was now standing at the center of a moment that would change everything. His life, his understanding of the world, and the bond between two very different beings who had just found each other in the most unlikely of ways. The smoke from the broken craft still rose into the air, curling like dark ribbons against the starlit sky. He held the small alien child close, feeling its fragile body trembling in his arms. The soft glow from its skin lit his face faintly, like a pale lantern in the night. For a moment, he just stood there, catching his breath after the struggle of pulling the child free. But the sound of metal groaning and sparks snapping reminded him that the wreck was not safe. Parts of it still shifted, threatening to collapse further. He needed to move away. He stepped carefully over the scattered pieces of broken panels, his eyes fixed on the path out of the clearing. Every step felt heavy, not from the weight of the child, but from the questions in his mind. What was this thing he had just saved? Where had it come from? And what would happen when others found out? He didn't have the answers, and strangely, he wasn't searching for them yet. The only thing that mattered was the small life in his arms. The child whimpered softly, its wide eyes darting around as if searching for something familiar. It tried to shift its tiny hand toward the wreck, its glowing fingers trembling. He followed, its gaze, and understood. The child wasn't just frightened, it was looking for someone. Maybe its parent, maybe someone else who had been with it. His chest tightened at the thought that this child might be all alone. He crouched down beside a fallen tree at the edge of the clearing and set the child gently on the ground, kneeling beside it. "Stay here," he said softly, not knowing if it could understand his words but hoping his calm tone would bring comfort. The child blinked at him, its chest still rising and falling too quickly. He gave it a reassuring nod, then turned back toward the wreck. The hole in the side of the strange ship still glowed faintly. He hesitated before stepping closer, peering inside. The sight was like nothing he had ever seen. The interior seemed to shift in colors, as if the walls themselves were alive. Strange symbols ran along the edges of what looked like control panels, but they flickered and sparked as if the energy within them was dying. He saw no other movement inside, no sign of another being. The silence was heavy, broken only by the occasional hiss of steam escaping from cracks. He returned quickly to the child, who looked up at him with anxious eyes. "No one else," he whispered, though he wasn't sure why he spoke aloud. The child made a soft sound, almost like a sigh, and reached out a hand toward him. Without hesitation, he scooped it back into his arms. The child pressed its head against his chest, and he could feel its heartbeat quick and fragile. Suddenly, a sharp sound cut through the air, a rustling, heavy, deliberate, not like the natural movements of the forest. His body stiffened. The child's head lifted, its glowing eyes staring toward the trees. More rustling followed, closer this time, and he realized they were not alone. His instincts told him to run, but his feet stayed planted. He shifted the child in his arms protectively, scanning the tree line. The night seemed to hold its breath. Then from between the trees, shapes began to emerge. At first only shadows, then clearer, tall figures, moving with a precision that was nothing like the stumbling of lost travelers. Their forms glimmered under the faint starlight, their outlines sharp and unfamiliar. The child let out a soft cry, not of fear this time, but of recognition. It wriggled slightly in his arms, as if trying to reach toward the approaching figures. He tightened his hold, his heart pounding. His mind raced with questions. Were these the child's people? Or were they something else entirely? The figures stepped closer, and now he could see them clearly. They were armored, their tall frames covered in silver-like plating that caught the faint glow of the wreck behind him. Their movements were silent, smooth, disciplined. Each one carried something that looked like a weapon, though unlike any he had seen before. The light from their helmets reflected in their eyes, making them look both human and not human at the same time. One of them raised a hand and the others stopped. The clearing fell into an even deeper silence. The man felt his muscles tense. He knew he couldn't fight them, not with a child in his arms, not with weapons pointed in his direction. But still he didn't put the child down. His protective instinct was stronger than his fear. The warriors stood in formation, their gazes locked on him and the child. He wondered what they saw, an enemy holding one of their young or a rescuer who had acted out of kindness. His heart thudded in his chest, waiting for their move. The child stirred again, this time turning in his arms and letting out a soft sound, almost like a call. The warriors shifted slightly as if they recognized the voice. Their silence carried tension, but it was not the silence of aggression. It was the silence of waiting. For someone. And then, as the man's eyes scanned the line of armored figures, one of them stepped aside. From behind them, a new figure appeared, taller, carrying a presence that was different from the rest. The air seemed to change, heavy with authority, as she stepped into the clearing. Her form was regal, her movements fluid, and even from a distance. Her gaze locked directly on the child in his arms. The man's breath caught. This was no ordinary soldier. This was someone far more important, someone the others looked to for direction. The child in his arms reacted instantly, letting out a soft cry that was almost relieved. For the first time that night, he felt the weight of what he had done settle on him fully. Saving the child had been an instinct, an act of humanity. But now standing in front of these beings, he realized he had stepped into something much larger, something that connected not just him and the child, but two worlds that had never touched before. The figure continued forward, slow, deliberate, every step echoing authority. The warriors did not move, their weapons still lowered but ready. The man tightened his hold on the child once more, bracing himself for whatever was about to happen. The quiet night of his small town was gone. The forest was no longer just trees and shadows. It was the stage of something extraordinary. The child he had rescued was not just a lost being from a broken craft. It was the center of a story that was unfolding right in front of him, a story that would demand more courage from him than he had ever known he carried. The tall figure stepped into the clearing, and immediately the air around seemed to shift. The man felt it deep inside, a quiet pressure, a presence that demanded attention without a single word spoken. She was taller than the warriors around, yet her movements were graceful, like someone who did not need to prove her authority. It was already carved into her very being. Her armor was unlike theirs, shimmering with patterns that looked alive, glowing faintly as though made from something beyond metal. Her eyes shone, not harshly, but with a brilliance that made it hard to look away. The child in his arms reacted before he could. It wriggled, stretching out a small, glowing hand toward her, its soft cry carrying through the clearing. He felt the child's small body lean forward, and he knew at once this was no ordinary leader. This was the child's mother, and not just a mother, but a queen. The way the armored warriors moved, shifting slightly, lowering their weapons, waiting for her command, proved it without need for words. The man's heart raced. He had never been face to face with royalty of any kind, and now here he was, holding the most precious life this queen had. He did not know whether she would see him as a savior or as a thief. He did not move. His instincts told him to stay still, to show no threat, though every nerve in his body was tense. The queen stopped only a few steps away from him. Her eyes studied him, not with anger, but with a deep, sharp curiosity. She tilted her head slightly, as if measuring every detail, the way he held the child, the way his arms shielded it protectively, the way his expression carried both fear and determination. For a long moment there was silence. Even the forest seemed to hold its breath, waiting for what she would do. Then she lifted her hand. The warriors behind her straightened, their posture changing as if waiting for her signal. But instead of pointing to them, instead of giving an order to strike, she lowered her hand gently. The weapons were lowered instantly, and the heavy tension in the air eased, if only a little. The man did not understand their language, but he understood this gesture. She was not here to harm him. She was here for the child. Slowly, carefully, he shifted the child in his arms so it could see her more clearly. The small being reached out again, making a sound that was full of longing. It was the sound of a child calling to its mother. For the first time he saw the queen's face soften. The strength in her gaze did not fade, but behind it appeared something deeply human: relief. She stepped closer, and though the warriors tensed as if ready to react, she ignored them. Her eyes never left his. The man swallowed hard. He wanted to speak, but no words came. All he could do was gently hold the child out, not fully giving it away, but showing that he had no intention of keeping it from her. The child squirmed toward her, and in that moment, the queen moved with surprising speed, closing the last distance and reaching out with her arms. The child leapt into her embrace, its glowing hands clinging to her armor, its face pressing against her chest. She held it close, her movements firm yet gentle, a mother reunited with her child. A strange light flickered across her armor, as if it responded to her emotions. The man let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Relief washed over him, yet a new feeling quickly followed. Her gaze returned to him, and this time it was not simply curiosity. It was recognition. She knew what he had done. He had risked his life in the wreck, lifted heavy debris with bare hands, and protected the child without hesitation, even when surrounded by her warriors. The queen stepped back slightly, the child still clinging to her. Then she spoke. The words were not in his language, but the sound was powerful, flowing like music yet carrying the weight of command. He could not understand the meaning, but he understood the tone. It was gratitude. One of the warriors moved forward, tapping something on their arm. A small device flickered with light, projecting a soft voice that translated her words. "You saved what is most precious to me." The man blinked, stunned. The device repeated her words, clear and calm. His mouth went dry. He had no idea what to say. Finally, he managed to stammer, I just did what anyone would do." The translation device carried his words, and when the queen heard them, her eyes narrowed slightly as if she doubted his statement. She looked at him with a depth that made him feel as though she was reading into his soul. Her lips curved, not quite a smile, but something close. Her voice rang again, strong, yet soft. The device translated after a short pause. "No, not anyone. Many would have run. Many would have feared. But you stayed." The words struck him harder than he expected. He realized she was right. He had not thought about it in the moment, but now that he did, it was true. Anyone else might have turned away, might have feared the glowing child or the strange wreck. But he hadn't. His first thought had been to help, nothing more. The queen shifted the child in her arms, who now seemed calmer, resting its head against her shoulder. She stepped closer again, her eyes fixed on him. Then, in a motion that surprised even her warriors, she inclined her head slightly. It was not a deep bow, but it was enough to send shock through those who witnessed it. The warriors exchanged glances, but none dared to question. He stood frozen, his mind racing. The queen of an alien people, bowing to him. He didn't know what to feel: honored, confused, overwhelmed, perhaps all at once. The device translated her final words, spoken firmly, without hesitation. "Your courage is seen. Your name will not be forgotten." The man lowered his gaze briefly, unsure how to respond to such words. He had never sought recognition, never imagined his actions would matter beyond the moment. Yet now, standing in the forest with the queen and her child before him, he realized he had become part of something far larger than himself. The night no longer felt like the quiet night of his small town. It felt like the beginning of a story that would echo far beyond this forest, carried by voices and stars he could not yet imagine. The queen stood tall in the clearing, her child safe in her arms, the faint glow of its body resting against her armor. Around them the forest remained silent, but the man could feel the unspoken tension in the air. The warriors kept their weapons, lowered but stayed alert, their eyes moving between him and their queen. He felt like every breath he took was being measured. For a long moment no one moved. The queen's gaze remained on him, calm yet intense. She had already shown gratitude, already spoken words that carried more weight than he could fully grasp. But now there was something else in her eyes, something deeper, recognition. She did not look at him as though he were just another human. She looked at him as though she saw something more. Finally, she spoke again. Her voice was low, steady, and the translation device picked up her words after a short pause. In my world, saving a royal child is more than an act of kindness. It is an act of honor. It binds the savior and the one saved in a bond of trust. He froze, not knowing how to respond. His lips parted slightly, but no words came. The device translated his silence as nothing, but his expression spoke enough. He was overwhelmed. He had never thought of himself as a hero. He had acted on instinct, nothing more. Yet to her it was something much greater. The queen lifted the child slightly, as if presenting it to him. The child blinked at him with glowing eyes and let out a soft sound, reaching one hand toward him again. The simple gesture touched him more deeply than he expected. It was as if the child remembered his comfort, the warmth of his arms, and was unwilling to let go of that bond so easily. The queen noticed this, and for a brief moment her face softened again. She glanced back at him. You did not just save my child. You carried it as your own. That cannot be ignored. The warriors stirred at her words, clearly unsettled. They exchanged looks with each other, shifting their weight, as though unsure if they agreed with their queen's tone. But none dared to speak. Her word was law, and they obeyed without question. The man cleared his throat nervously. I didn't do it for honor, he said quietly. I only did what felt right. Anyone would have done the same. The device repeated his words, and once more the queen tilted her head, her gaze sharp and steady. No, she said. Not anyone. Many fear what they do not understand. Many turn away from the unknown. You did not. Her words struck him again, deeper this time. He felt his chest tighten. He wanted to deny it, to insist that he was no different than anyone else, but a part of him knew she was right. He had run toward danger, not away. He had reached for the child even when every part of his mind screamed at him that this was beyond human understanding. The queen lowered her head slightly once more, the faintest sign of respect, and then turned to her warriors. She spoke a series of sharp words in her own tongue, and the warriors immediately shifted into a wider circle, watching the forest carefully. The message was clear. The queen wished to be left undisturbed. She turned back to him. Your courage has been seen. Your name, your face, your action, it will be carried in my people's memory. The man swallowed hard, his mind struggling to keep up with what was happening. I'm just a man from a small town, he said softly. The queen's lips curved slightly, as though the idea amused her. Perhaps. But tonight, you are more. The child clung closer to her, but its glowing eyes still peeked at him, unwilling to break the bond completely. The queen noticed this too, and her expression shifted once more. She stepped closer, her voice lower now, almost personal. My warriors may see you as nothing more than a human, but I do not. You are one who stepped into fire and pulled life from it. That makes you more than ordinary. He felt a strange warmth spread in his chest. It wasn't pride, not exactly. It was something quieter, something humbler. He wasn't used to being seen this way, especially not by someone like her. Before he could answer, the queen's gaze turned toward the wreck behind them. Her face hardened. her eyes scanning the damaged craft. She spoke again, her tone sharper now. The device translated, "This place is not safe. Others will come. Not all will be grateful for what you have done. Some will see you as a threat." Her words sent a chill down his spine. He thought about what might happen if more of her kind appeared, less merciful, less trusting. Would they see him as a rescuer, or as someone who had dared to touch what did not belong to him? The Queen stepped closer again, her presence powerful, yet strangely comforting. "You will not be forgotten," she repeated firmly, "but now you must decide, return to your life, or step forward into a path you do not yet understand." The words echoed in his mind long after she had spoken them. Return to his life or step forward. It felt like a choice too big for one man. Yet it had been placed in his hands. As the night deepened, he realized this was not just about saving a child anymore. This was about something far larger, a bond that connected him to beings from beyond, the stars. And whether he was ready or not, the Queen had already marked him as part of their story. The night stretched on, heavy with silence after the Queen's words. The man stood in the clearing, his heart racing, the child's faint glow still shimmering from the Queen's arms. The choice hung over him like a weight he could not shake off. Return to the safety of his simple life, or step forward into a future he could not predict. The Queen's warriors waited quietly in the shadows, but their eyes never left him. They too seemed to understand that something important was happening, something that would shape the way their people remembered this night. The Queen remained calm, her gaze steady and unblinking, as though she had all the patience in the world to wait for his answer. He thought about his life. The small house at the edge of town, the familiar streets, the people who knew him as nothing more than a kind neighbor or a hard-working man. It was a life of quiet routines, safe and predictable. He thought of the comfort of waking up to the same view, the same morning air, the same sounds of his ordinary world. But then he looked at the child, resting against its mother, eyes still, fixed on him with trust and recognition. He remembered the moment when he had heard its cry, the moment when he had reached into the wreck without hesitation. That instinct had changed everything. In that moment he hadn't been just a man, he had been a protector. And now that bond pulled at him, stronger than fear, stronger than reason. The Queen finally spoke again. Her voice was soft, almost gentle. "If you walk away now, you will live. You will return to your people, and this night will fade into whispers and memory. But if you choose to step forward, you will walk beside us. You will see things your people have never dreamed of, and you will carry a bond that cannot be broken." Her words shook him to the core. To walk beside them, to see worlds beyond his own. The thought was overwhelming. But the deeper truth was simpler. He could not forget the child, nor the look in the Queen's eyes. He could not return to pretending he had never seen them. His life had already changed. He took a slow breath, then lifted his chin. "I don't know what waits for me," he said quietly, "but I know I can't turn away." "Not now." The translation device echoed his words, and the Queen's expression shifted for the first time into something unmistakable. A true smile. It was small, faint, but it carried warmth. She nodded once, firm and certain. "Then you have chosen. You will walk with us." The warriors around her exchanged brief glances, but none dared to challenge her decision. The Queen's word was final. The child let out a soft sound, almost like laughter, and reached again toward him. He felt his chest tighten with an emotion he could not name. The Queen turned slightly, speaking sharp words to her warriors. They moved quickly, preparing something at the edge of the clearing. A low hum filled the air as a circular platform of light appeared, rising slowly from the ground. It shimmered with energy, forming a gate of sorts, glowing with colors that danced like liquid stars. The man stared in awe. This was no dream. This was real. All of it. The Queen stepped closer once more. "Your life will not be the same," she said through the device, "but your courage has earned you a place in ours. You will not be alone. He looked one last time at the dark forest around him, the familiar earth under his feet. Then he looked back at her, at the child, at the impossible gate glowing with light. His choice was made. Together they stepped forward. The forest faded behind them, replaced by brilliance and sound unlike anything he had ever known. His simple life was gone, but in its place was something far greater. He had saved a child, and in doing so, he had been chosen by a queen. The night, that had begun as quiet and ordinary, had become the beginning of a story that would carry his name into the stars.